Folks, welcome back to the Wanneroo channel. Hope you all are doing great out there. Yes, this is an actual beach behind me, not a green screen. And today I have an awesome video for you on the Audi S4 B8 B8.5 chassis in regards to a couple of parts or maintenance things that you need to do on these cars to keep them reliable. And I'm convinced, based on what I've seen, if you do these things, then for the most part, you know, you won't have much to worry about for a while. That's what I've seen anyways. So I figured I'd put this video together to help you all out in case you're thinking about buying one, or maybe you've owned one for a little bit and you kind of don't know much about it in terms of the maintenance and different things that you can do. And I've always heard about Audis where people kind of whine and moan that, well, they're not reliable. And usually there's some quirk or something about one particular model or this or that, and a lot of it is just kind of doing some research and kind of some practical experience and doing your maintenance. And as long as you kind of stay up on the maintenance, I have found over 20 years with Audis, they really don't give me much trouble at all, and they really don't let me down. They have been in a lot of situations almost like a tank, where they just keep chugging along. So in this video, what I've done is I've divided it up into several segments. I've spent maybe about a couple minutes on each segment on that particular part or maintenance thing that I would recommend that you do based on my experience. And at the end, we'll go ahead and just have a brief little wrap up with all that, and hope you get a lot out of the video. We'll see you at the end. All right, folks, so another essential part that should be replaced, especially if you don't know when it was last replaced, if you've just bought one of these vehicles used, is the water pump. And actually, I'm just about to replace the water pump on my S4. And this is one of those things where, whether rightly or wrongly, I've always heard a lot of folks kind of complain about water pumps on Audis. Whether that's justified or not justified, I don't know. I've never really researched it much. It's a thing for me is that pretty much any time that I tear significantly into the front end of the engine or anything like that, I've just had the mechanic go ahead and replace it. So now that I've owned Audis for 20 years now, to my knowledge, that I can remember, I don't think I've ever had one fail on me, but I've heard about it happening to other people. And so it's just one of those things, and also too, if you read a lot of the internet forums as well. So it's just the thing of you're better off just going ahead and replacing it. This is going to be something that's essential for cooling with your engine. So if the water pump goes, it's not going to be a good thing for you. If you end up getting stranded someplace you don't want to be or whatever because the water pump conked out. So just go ahead and replace it. My understanding too, and it might be these holes here, I'm not quite sure, but there is some sort of drain hole in these to where when the water pump is getting ready to fail, they will actually start weeping coolant to kind of give you a heads up that something isn't right there, and you better get on top of it and fix it. One of the things I have found in my 2 decades of Audi ownership is that in general, although the cars are kind of more highly engineered, maybe more high-strung than other vehicles, if something is going to fail on them, typically they're going to give you a warning that they are going to fail at some point. And as long as you rectify it, then you shouldn't run into any big issues. I think it's the people that ignore some of those signs that something is starting to go, and then they run into these problems. But definitely the water pump, as I said, change this on a regular basis and you won't have anything to worry about, and it just saves you a lot of trouble. All right, folks, so another essential part that you should always change or upgrade, especially if you're not sure if it's been done recently, is the thermostat. The thermostat is up at the front of the engine there, basically kind of underneath the supercharger on the S4. It's a relatively inexpensive part, but if it does seize on you, which has happened to me, it's going to give you a lot of headaches, and you're going to end up having to drive the car, depending on whether it's seized open or closed. It may render the car pretty much to where you're going to have to tow it, Or it could be a thing where you can turn on the heat full blast and limp the car home while kind of driving at a very moderate speed, pretty much at just over idle speed, really. So again, if you tear into that front of the engine or around the supercharger, just go ahead and have your mechanic replace these. On the early Audi B8 S4s, these were notorious for failing sometimes in as little as 40,000 miles. So it's one of those things where just go ahead and do it. That way you can kind of avoid potential issues down the road. Letting these go for 100,000 miles or 150,000 miles is probably not a good idea, and at some point it's going to catch you out and give you those issues where potentially it could leave you by the side of the road. So just fix it. Now, another thing that you should definitely do if you have a Audi with a dual clutch gearbox is you should be aware that the fluid in it really is only good for about 40,000 miles. And I've seen plenty of folks that whine and complain about transmission issues or their transmission failing. And oftentimes when you get to the bottom of it, you find that they did not basically do what amounts to an oil change on that transmission. So these transmissions, they're very good. They handle a lot of power and torque. Pretty much in terms of the drivability aspect, they drive very well. And I've always enjoyed the one that I have in my S4. But you must do essentially your oil change on these transmissions. And what you're looking for is about every 40,000 miles, they're going to need to take the bottom pan off of the transmission, drain out all the gear oil, replace the filters. Now, on most of the S4s, there are 2 filters. A lot of times they only change 1. I actually change 2. You'll find from different Audi parts suppliers, there are various kits that are available that have every little part of everything that you need, like a new transmission gasket, whenever they take kind of the bottom half off, both of the filters, all the gear oil fluid that you need and everything. You need, I think it comes out to usually about 6.5 quarts of or liters of gear oil that you'll need, and you'll need a specific dual clutch gear oil. So like I said, from a lot of the Audi part suppliers, you can get a whole kit that has everything you need. It is a job that you can do yourself. I don't think it's that hard to do, but if you don't have a lift or something like that, it's probably easier to have a independent shop take care of it. Or if you want the dealer, usually the dealer's going to charge you significantly more, but you can get out there and compare prices. So to avoid any sort of mechanical or maintenance issues with those dual clutch transmissions, change the oil and the filters in them every 40,000 miles. If you are unsure that oil has been changed and those filters have been changed in terms of when the last time it was or whatever, and you've just bought one of these vehicles, just go ahead and do it. It's worth it at the end of the day to avoid any potential issues or transmission failure down the road. Now, another thing on the Audi S4 with the supercharged engine, and this would also apply to anyone else with a 3-liter supercharged engine that was also in some of the other Audis as well, is that at some point in the life of the vehicle is to replace the supercharger oil. Now, this is something apparently that Audi kind of designed to where it's supposed to be good. The oil is supposed to be pretty much good for the life of the supercharger. However, for a lot of folks that have ended up draining that oil out of the supercharger, they have found it to be quite dirty, or even with little tiny metal pieces in it and stuff like that. And to me, it would just make sense probably if you're going to own the car long enough, or if the car is getting on in years, to go ahead and replace that oil. Anytime that the supercharger is going to come off the engine for some reason, and you have the supercharger in your hands basically, you may as well just change the oil in it. So there's companies like ECS Tuning that have come up with a kit where you have your bottle compressor oil here from Audi, and then also too there's a magnetic drain plug that you can install, and then there's 2 gaskets for the vent tube, and then also too what comes with it is some intake manifold gaskets to go ahead and replace those with fresh ones. So you know, for a simple little kit and the cost of less than $100, if you ever are going to take the supercharger off, which probably at some point replacing other things, that is going to happen at some point on the car, just go ahead and replace the supercharger oil, and that way hopefully avoid any sort of issues with the supercharger. And it's something where you don't have to do necessarily on a set schedule, but if the car has over 100,000 miles on it, and it's, you know, like I said, the supercharger has to come off for some reason, just do it. At the end of the day, I don't see that it hurts. The same platforms is that one of the great thing with a lot of these cars, especially the Audis in particular, is that they do a very good job of keeping the contact patch of the tire in contact with the road as much as possible compared to other vehicles. One of the ways they do that is they have a very complicated control arm setup compared to a lot of other vehicles. The downside to that, though, is that typically over time, all these bushings are going to start to wear. When they start to wear, you're going to get clunking in the front end. You're going to start hearing maybe it sounds like dinner plates rattling if you go over bumps and different things like that. When you start hearing that sort of stuff and you start to see that the front end is not as precise as it might have been when you first owned the car, a good chance that your control arms are starting to go. Now, for me, I have found typically they last maybe about 80,000 miles. I currently have one Audi now that I've put 100,000 miles on, and I don't think it's ever had the control arms replaced, but I'm starting to get kind of some clunking and some noise out of the front end when I go over bumps and stuff. And I know what it is because I've kind of been there before with this. So the fix for it is to get a control arm kit and replace all the control arms at once. Now, you can go and replace them individually if you want. I don't recommend it. I just recommend going ahead and just doing them all at once. It's the easiest thing to do. And the one thing is with this company, Melee, I believe that's how it's pronounced, Melee. I've used their parts for a long time. And one of the things that they kind of promote with their control arms is that they're a bit more durable than the original equipment on the vehicle, and they're a little bit beefier, so they say. So the nice thing about getting this kit is that everything is all kind of contained in here. You have all of the different control arms that go on the vehicle. All the bushings are already there and ready to go. So it makes it very convenient for you to either buy this and do it yourself, or, you know, take it to your mechanic and have your mechanic do it. Usually for me, what I like to do is I like to order a lot of my own parts, and I like to kind of pick it out, and my mechanic is happy to do that. Some mechanics, they don't like to do that, you know, for, you know, different reasons, I'd imagine. But me personally, I just like to kind of pick out the parts I want and go get them. So with these Melee parts, I've used these before, been pretty happy with them. So it was kind of a no-brainer to go ahead and get these for my existing car. So as you can see, like, everything kind of comes in a complete kit. All the control arms, all the bushings already pressed in, and you're pretty much good to go. So what I'm talking points or deals that kind of goes around in regards to this car is the brakes. And so one of the big issues with the factory brakes on the Audi S4 from that era was that the brakes were very noisy or squealy. And I kind of went through this myself for about maybe 2 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, in regards to squealing brakes. And at times they could be very loud and obnoxious. And so previously I went ahead and I put EBC brakes and ceramic pads on the car, which I've had on there for 3 years. For the most part, they have done pretty good. They have excellent stopping power. The pedal feel, I think, is pretty good. But I did have an issue because they are slotted rotors, in that I could not resurface them. So at some point they got warped. My mechanic told me the reason being for that was the car was sitting for almost a year during coronavirus, and essentially the rotors and everything just kind of sat there and rusted, and I ended up with like ridges on my disc and all this other stuff. We can talk about that in another video. But anyways, so now I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and get some new brakes. Now, different options and stuff that you might have out there, you can go back to, you can use the factory brakes or the semi-metallic pads that the car comes with. For the most part, though, most folks out there that have an Audi S4, they're typically going to the aftermarket in terms of what they're going to do about the brakes. So in this case, what I've decided is to move away from the EBC brakes with the slotted rotors and go to something with just a solid rotor, no drilled rotors, no slotted rotors, anything like that, just the standard rotor. And one of the good things I've been hearing about was the Zimmerman rotors. Everyone pretty much that I could find online talking about them on forums and different stuff like that. They love these Zimmerman rotors. They're made in Germany. They have pretty good stopping power, no issues. They seem to last a long time, all that. So, especially for the price as well, the price is, actually one of the more cheaper options out there for this car. So I found that attractive as well. So having a look at them, from what I could see, they're definitely pretty nice, and they seem to be pretty good quality. They have this Z coating on them for corrosion protection while they're just sitting there on the shelf. So I'm sure this will all get eventually basically cleaned off, so to speak, whenever you start doing your braking and you start bedding in the brakes. But they look like a real nicely machined bit of disc. And so especially for the price, they're looking pretty good. So these are the front disc right here. And we'll have a look here in a second at the discs that go to They're very good in that respect. And one of the things that I came across with my vehicle, and which potentially you could come across in yours, is steering rack failure. And one big issue with that is if the steering rack goes, it's not a thing where you can just replace one piece of it or whatever. Basically, you're in for $1,800 plus whatever the labor charge is going to be wherever you're at to repair that. And from what I have been able to determine, one of the problems with it is that the water and other things make ingress into the steering rack and essentially damage it, and then it goes dead on you. So I've had this happen to me. Audi, they have done, I wouldn't really call it a recall, but they have assisted some owners with paying for repairs and such with that steering rack. So you can look into that. But one of the things I wanted to do to mitigate it was underneath the car, you have a plastic skid plate. And so the other thing too that I've kind of come across as well is a lot of people out there, it seems like with pickup trucks and stuff these days, is they throw all kinds of crap into the back of the pickup truck, and all this crap goes flying all over the place on the road. And every time I turn around, I'm trying to dodge from running over all this junk that comes flying out of these pickup truck beds. And I've had plenty of things hit the underside of my car and all that sort of thing. So trying to mitigate some of that. And one of the products I looked into that I quickly picked up on was product from ECS Tuning. And it's basically this aluminum skid plate. And so we can just kind of have a look here. Really nice piece of kit. And looks like it was, whoever did the manufacture for ECS, or if they did it themselves, very nice with the quality. And so I'm just trying to kind of mitigate some of these issues in terms of, different objects out there on the road, hitting stuff on the underside of my car. and then, you know, also to protecting it a little bit better. And that is the thing with the steering rack. It, you know, could definitely use a little more protection, and that's one of the things the shield does back towards the back there. So all in all, the instructions I went ahead and downloaded online. So the instructions are pretty thorough. And then the other thing too is they give you all the hardware for it as well. So quite a bit of hardware to install, but you know, should be relatively easy to do. And you know, I think it's going to add a lot to the car. And all right, folks, so we are looking down in the front of the engine here on an S4, and it's a little bit hard to see, but the thing that we're looking for is the accessory belt and the supercharger belt down in here. Total cost to replace these is about $200 or so, plus the labor. I think my mechanic charged like an hour and a half of labor, if I recall correctly, to do them. I would say do them every 40 to 60,000 miles. I think Audi does have an exact mileage that they recommend you replace them, but somewhere in that range. So if I'm doing any sort of service where I'm going to take and move the front end out to the service position and get into the engine at all, you might as well just go ahead and replace them. The other thing too is that if you buy one of these and you're not sure when they were last replaced, it's probably a good idea to have your mechanic look at them and possibly look at replacing them, so you don't end up with any issues where you end up stranded or having any issues with the belt snapping. So that's just something to look for. So the engine here is starting to get dirty, which is funny because 2 years ago I did a video you can check out on my channel where I did an under hood kind of detail and kind of clean up under the hood, and it looks like it's time to do that again. There's definitely some dirt and smudge and stuff under here. So here's another thing that we need to think about, and that is the coil packs. So the coil packs are right here. This is a job technically where someone at home with a little bit of skills can do it, but you can also have your mechanic do it. It's not that difficult of a job. And pretty much what happens is the coil packs, they kind of start to go over time. So if you see any sort of drop in performance or anything like that, a lot of times it's an issue where the coil packs are starting to get old. Technically, they should last about 105,000 miles, I think is the recommended service interval on them, but they might start going before that. If one fails, which has happened to me on another Audi before, you will end up lacking a cylinder, so the engine's going to run very rough and all that. So you probably don't want to get into that, so it's just better just to go ahead and replace them, say at 90,000 miles or something like that. Or if you're running into any issues where you think you're kind of seeing a little bit of a performance problem or something, where the power just isn't there, the coil packs are definitely worth looking at, and also too, you can change the spark plugs at the same time as well. All right, folks, now it is time to wrap this video up on this very hot and muggy day, and we have our lovely S4 behind us. What a great car these are. For those of y'all out there, whether you've owned these for a while or you've just bought one, they are excellent vehicles, easy to modify, easy to repair. There's a lot of different mods and stuff you can get out there for them to even improve the performance even more. And they're just good all-around cars. Man, I just love them. And probably at some point I'll end up getting another and maybe turning this into a kind of strictly a track day car. So I definitely see that happening at some point down the road. So with this video, I hope I gave you guys some good ideas and some good solutions for some stuff out there where if you do a lot of this maintenance and you stay on top of it with these cars, because they are a little more high-strung than a lot of other cars out there. And if you do that maintenance and you stay on top of it, I think you'll find that you'll have a lot less issues with these cars than I hear a lot of people complain about, where they get a big bill about the transmission or whatever, and then you basically find out they've never serviced the transmission ever. So different things like that, where if you can do that maintenance work and, you know, put the money into it initially, I think it's going to reduce those chances of having those big issues and having to deal with that stuff. And so I just hope this video kind of gave you some good tips for that. Also too, there's a lot of knowledgeable folks out there. So if there's other stuff that I have forgotten, or you want to go ahead and chime in with some other stuff, feel free to do so. You know, there's probably other stuff that I don't know, you know, or whatever. You know, and that's the great thing about YouTube, is sharing information. So if you guys have more stuff, put it down below in the comments. I look forward to hearing that. And yeah, we're going to be doing more car videos on the channel in the future, so stay tuned. Make sure you all like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Definitely subscribe. Any links down below, check them out, and we'll see you all next time.